Tsai Ing-wen's so-called transit trip through the United States has heightened cross-strait tensions. This move is seen by Beijing as a provocation to China's sovereignty. During her stay in New York, Tsai Ing-wen went to the Hudson Institute and received the Global Leadership Award. The most controversial part, though, is Tsai's meeting with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the successor of Nancy Pelosi, who visited Taiwan last August. Using Taiwan as a pawn, will Washington's divide and conquer strategy vis-a-vis China ultimately reach the point of no return? Is Tsai Ing-wen helping or hurting the best interests of Taiwan? Welcome to this special edition of Tsai Ing-wen, her Washington Master's Voice. This is Tsai Ing-wen's seventh so-called transit through the United States as Taiwan's regional leader. Her most recent stopover was in 2019 on her way to Haiti and other Caribbean countries. A notable difference this time. Officially, Tsai would be on a 10-day trip to Belize and Guatemala, but in reality, she only spent 4 days in those countries and the remaining 6 days in the United States. I mean, that is a pretty long transit.
中方坚决反对任何形式的美台官方往来，坚决反对台湾当局领导人以任何名义、任何理由纂美，坚决反对美方违反一个中国原则，同台湾当局进行任何形式的接触。事实再次证明，台湾当局领导人赴美过境是假，谋求突破、宣扬台独是真。
反对台独会谈，反对台独会谈，人民勇敢自救。
Not only has Beijing condemned Tsai Ing-wen's trip as politically motivated, but many people on the island of Taiwan also believe that Tsai's move is harming Taiwan's own interests. Protests erupted on the day of her departure for America.
反对赴美卖台，反对赴美害台，台美勾结会台，台美勾结会台。
China is not our enemy. I'm a patriotic American. I love my country and I don't want World War III.
Preserving a facade of being neutral, the White House has downplayed Tsai's stopover as routine. However, many experts on international law believe that Washington's Taiwan policy throughout the decades, including allowing Tsai to visit and to meet senior U.S. leaders, violated the letter and the spirit of the One China Agreement, something the U.S. had come into legally binding deals with Beijing when the two sides established the diplomatic relations in 1979.
The United States recognizes the government of the People's Republic of China as a sole legal government of China. Within this context, the people of the United States will maintain cultural, commercial, and other unofficial relations with the people of Taiwan. The government of the United States of America acknowledges the Chinese position that there is but one China and Taiwan is part of China.
Yet in an about-face and double-dealing which is rife in U.S. foreign policy making, Washington passed the Taiwan Relations Act that same year, promising Taiwan military and strategic support vis-a-vis Beijing. In 1994, Lee Teng-hui, the secessionist-minded late leader of Taiwan region, made a stopover in Hawaii, setting what Beijing considers a dangerous precedent for Taiwan leaders to use so-called unofficial private trips to pursue stopover diplomacy, in fact, rallying support among the Americans for Taiwan independence. Things took a turn for the worse, much worse, I would say, in March 2018, when U.S. Congress passed the Taiwan Travel Act, which allows U.S. government officials at all levels to travel to Taiwan and meet with their counterparts there, and vice versa. During a visit to Taipei, Robert O'Brien, former U.S. National Security Advisor, was even awarded a medal by Tsai Ing-wen for his contributions to U.S.-Taiwan relations. Yet, as people are still figuring out what O'Brien's contributions to Taiwan really was, O'Brien went on the record and said this.
I mean, the United States and its allies are never going to let those factories fall into Chinese hands, even if there was a successful invasion of Taiwan.
They would be gone, is what you're saying. The Chinese successfully took Taiwan. Those facilities and production capacity would be gone. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I can't imagine they'd be intact.
According to a poll conducted by the Democracy Foundation in Taiwan, 55% of respondents believe that the United States is using Taiwan as a strategic tool to contain China, rather than caring about Taiwan's own best interests. This fear has been heightened by O'Brien's revelation of the Taiwan Destruction Plan.
现在是由美国前国家安全顾问公开讲出来的，他们确有这样的一个计划。美国的立场就是假装保卫台湾，实质上要毁灭台湾。那谁是我们的敌人，也越来越清晰了。
At the end of the day, a common denominator among Tsai and her patrons in Washington is domestic politics and personal political gains, which in many ways contradicted the best interests of Taiwan. To pull it off, Tsai Ing-wen not only seeks help from Washington, but accelerated a domestic agenda known as de-sinicization. The Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, has a track record of rallying a fraction of Taiwan society for secession and independence through education and indoctrination. Since coming to power, Tsai Ing-wen has initiated a series of policies aimed at de-sinicizing Taiwan.
In fact, the so-called de-sinicization means to de-sinicize the core values and interests which Taiwan depends on to exist. Such a move will have a profound impact on the future development of the people in Taiwan.
In order to claim the right for self-determination, Taiwan must be an independent and different from mainland China race. So DPP has tried for a long, long time to redefine what Taiwan and Taiwanese is about. The number one tactic is to dilute the importance of China, Chinese culture, Chinese language, and Chinese heritage. They no longer have a focus on mainland China, on Chinese history, and Chinese literature. That has a huge impact on the next generations, the future generations, in terms of how they see themselves, what their affinity is, and how they are predisposed to look at present-day China, being it culturally or economically.
In fact, the Taiwan authorities have always been promoting de-sinicization in the social, cultural, historical, and educational fields. Former leaders Li Tenghui, Chen Shui-bian, and the current leader Tsai Ing-wen have all intended to cut off the historical and the political link between the Chinese mainland and the Taiwan region.
So from that roots, you come to see Chen Shui-bian, and now you see Tsai Ing-wen. All of them have a very strong Japanese identification and little Chinese identification. With them being at control, you not only have our textbook or the curricula being changed, you also have a lot of changes in societies. For example, today you will see an entirely in Japanese advertising on local TV, which was never seen and never heard of. You now also have a government plan to remove Chinese from all official tests. So if you want to write for high school or college, or even if you just want to write for being a civil servant, they plan not to have a Chinese language test being included in that. So you can see a very, very strong pro-Japan Taiwan independence movement. It's not just independent from mainland China, it's independent from China and affiliated with Japan. Those are the strong underpinning in Taiwan. If you don't see that, you will miss the really big telltale sign.
DPP and especially Tsai Ing-wen did give some negative impact on the tradition, on the history of China in this regard. But I don't think she can make it, because I've been to Taiwan twice, and I'm quite happy that the local people still think they're all Chinese, and they would like to continue the cultural, the exchanges with people from mainland, and continue such a tradition of China. This is the foundation for the One China policy.
Now, the DPP's strategy is to exploit the de facto separation with the Chinese mainland due to the Chinese Civil War in the 1940s and to get rid of the Chineseness in social, cultural, and political life of people in Taiwan. The campaign has supporters from the United States. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, is one of the staunchest supporters for Taiwan. And in return, Taiwan is one of its largest donors. According to CSIS website, Tsai Ing-wen administration has donated between $200,000 to just under $500,000 for regional studies. The Responsible Statecraft organization published a report describing Taiwan's funding of American think tanks as omnipresent and rarely disclosed. 5 major Washington think tanks, the Brookings Institution, the Center for American Progress, the Center for a New American Security, and the CSIS and the Hudson Institute, all receive funding from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. The report says that none of their researchers disclose the potential conflict of interests between Taiwanese funding and advocating for more security guarantees for and trade with Taiwan.
Ever since the beginning of DPP, they have always shown themselves, especially in Washington, as the pro-democracy and pro-progressive value party. Therefore, it is extremely expedient for them to partner with especially the U.S. Democratic Party. Especially the current rhetoric, the narrative, is to find partners in democracy and partners in value. Tsai Ing-wen knows exactly what to say. However, under her control, her administration was doing exactly the opposite. In the first term of Tsai Ing-wen, she showed to Taiwan that she is a moderate and she has the ability to maintain status quo across Taiwan Straits. With her background as part of the KMT Security Council member under Li Denghui, she had a lot of buy-in in those narratives. But after her second term, her government has quickly passed legislations against their competitor, their major competitors, KMT, and other political parties. For instance, they passed ill-gotten party asset law to confiscate party assets, including any kinds of party assets from KMT and the so-called KMT affiliates. Therefore, there were a lot of collateral damages. They also passed the so-called Transformation Justice Act that allowed them to rewrite the entire history since 1949. In fact, they can rewrite the history since 1935, when Taiwan returned to the hands of Chinese government. Before that, it was under Japanese rule. The third thing they did was they also confiscated media licenses such as CTI, and they confiscated the assets, a huge number of assets, of a farmland association which was established in Qing Dynasty. All of this shows to the world, at least shows to people in Taiwan, that democracy in their explanation is like a facade in a studio. What Pelosi saw when she came here, she saw that beautiful facade of a democratic avenue like in the studio. But people in Taiwan was experiencing the backbone, the true authoritarian movements made by Tsai Ing-wen's administration in different way, shape, and form. So I would say they are neither democratic nor progressive. It's only a facade of value that the United States welcomed. The United States turned a blind eye to all the sufferings and all the people being oppressed by the current DPP government.
The U.S. knows very well that the Taiwan region not being reunited with the mainland is an invaluable asset for them. One analogy is that Taiwan is the watchdog for the U.S. who needs to bring his own food. There's nothing more pathetic than that.
U.S. politicians get callings from Taiwan, too. The Taiwan Lobby report published by the Center for International Policy found that Taiwan's lobbyists had contacted Nancy Pelosi's office 18 times during the summer of 2019.
The DPP has been lobbying Nancy Pelosi since 2018 through public relation companies. How much money have they spent? $49,377 US.
On August 2, 2022, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi landed in China's Taiwan region and met with the leader of the island the next day. Tsai conferred Pelosi with an order of propitious clause with special grand cordon and said that she's truly grateful to Pelosi for showcasing U.S. Congress's staunch support for Taiwan.
The two sides, I mean Tsai Ing-wen and Nancy Pelosi, would like to use such a chance to get more support or get more attention from the public as a so-called democratic system or democratic leader in this region or in the United States. So I think this is not a real democracy for the local people in Taiwan and also for the Americans this time. DPP would like to manipulate the so-called democracy, freedom, human rights in Taiwan for the party's sake, because this is only a flag for the party to mobilize support from the local people and also get some support from Washington, D.C. So this is actually a game played by the party, especially by Tsai Ing-wen.
From the political maneuver perspective, Tsai Ing-wen does seem to be gaining a lot in terms of notoriety as well as wide support from the so-called Western partners. However, people in Taiwan, especially those who are opposed to her policy or her administrative measures, have now been sacrificed. So the three perspectives are very, very different. Let's talk about people who were being oppressed by the DPP government. Those people have in the past hoped that international community would see the true suffering of the people and have tried to wage all kinds of campaigns so that people can see what's really happening. With Nancy Pelosi coming to Taiwan, touting the achievement of the DPP government, it's stepping on all the hopes and dreams of the people who are still fighting those injustice measures. In addition to that, the current change of the status quo, I put in quote, because Tsai Ing-wen promised everybody that she would maintain status quo. Status quo for most people is peace and stability across Taiwan Straits. Now, anyone who is against changing of status quo in Taiwan now is being pushed to the sideline or being mobilized and said, look, mainland China has done all these military exercises against us. They are the big bad wolf. You have to come behind the government. You have to mobilize. So you see this language and narrative on all front pages. So also, those who have hoped for justice are now being sold, and those who have hoped for peace are now being mobilized and oppressed.
There's been too much instability that has crept into the US's one China policy over the last 5 years, I would submit. And Mr. Biden has not helped the cause either by tamping down what the Trump administration, the misdeeds that the Trump administration did in this regard. He himself has contradicted himself in terms of where US stands on one China policy. And what we have seen over the last couple of years is a relentless challenge of that one China principle of China by way of the US's one China policy. And it is this instability in the US's one China policy, despite President Biden's reassurances directly to President Xi, that doesn't hold up, doesn't stand. It adds to mistrust rather than trust.
When Tsai Ing-wen assumed office in 2016, the regime on Taiwan was recognized by 22 countries. This number has shrunk to 13 as of early April 2023. The most recent country to switch diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing was the Central American state of Honduras.
一个中国原则是国际社会普遍共识。
The One China principle is the general consensus of the international community and the basic norms of international relations, recognized by the UN General Assembly Resolution No. 2758 of 1971.
Tsai Ing-wen's Taiwan independence campaign is enriching the United States and consolidating her power base at the expense of many of the island's domestic priorities. Many residents in Taiwan are struggling to make ends meet. Rising inflation, aging infrastructure, growing inequalities are all issues facing Taiwan.
We are living such a miserable life. Tsai Ing-wen, are you listening to us?
Economy is in a slump. How can we expect a better life?
The officials are living in the royal palace and know nothing about people's woes. That's what I want to tell Tsai. Let her think about it.
As we all have seen in recent years, the DPP and especially Tsai Ing-wen as the regional leader, they would like to manipulate the international situation for the sake of the DPP party and for Tsai Ing-wen herself, not only for the people, but also for the some specific interests of group in the island. And in this regard, we all have seen the bad result of development of the economy in the land and the trade relations with other countries in this region. So I think for the assessment of the so-called governance of the party, I mean DPP and Tsai Ing-wen, I'm sure everybody can say this is really a bad party for the people, for the relation between mainland and the island. And I think in the future, I don't think the DPP party or Tsai Ing-wen can make it in going independence. This is really a common sense for everybody in this region. But I'm sure Tsai Ing-wen and her party will continue the manipulation of the situation for the party's sake in the future, not for the sake of the public in Taiwan.
In response to many of the DPP policies that jeopardize Taiwan's best interests, people on the island expressed their dissatisfaction in 2022 Taiwan local elections. The KMT outperformed the DPP, reclaiming many of the pro-KMT territories that the DPP had previously gained, resulting in the DPP's worst electoral defeat in history. Following this, Tsai Ing-wen resigned as party chair.
选举的成绩不如预期，我们虚心地接受选举的结果，也接受台湾人民的决定。即刻起，辞去民主进步党主席一职。我们也没有让台湾人民再次的感动，赢得人民的托付。
Even as Tsai Ing-wen stepping down as party leader, it remains to be seen to what extent will her party keep pushing for Taiwan independence. As Tsai's term is set to end in 2024, what kind of a politician will she be remembered for? Will she be remembered as someone who led Taiwan's secessionist movement to a point of no return? Or will she be recalled as someone who toughened Beijing's resolve to fasten the process of reunification?
I think she will either be remembered as the one who broke and changed the status quo and have no ability to restore an equilibrium of peace and stability, or as someone who is a strong partner of the United States and Japan. I'm not ruling out the second possibility, even though with that second possibility, Taiwan will pay a huge price in the process.
我最好不要评价他因为没有什么好评价嘛。因为对我来讲他的所作所为不是他能决定不是他自己能决定。台湾常常说了台湾的命运由台湾人决定。我说句实话，台湾的命运从来都由美国人决定。
In cultivating a separate Taiwanese identity unrelated to that of the Chinese, and in courting Western support for a so-called independent Taiwan, Tsai is not only distorting history for political expediency, but challenging Beijing's red line.
In Taiwan, people like Tsai Ing-wen follow the U.S. lead and renounce the national interest. These perverse actions will not change the international consensus of the One China principle or the belief that Taiwan will return to the motherland. Those who play with fire will perish by it,
This is the time that DPP is receiving an extremely clear signal that if they continue to push the Taiwan independence agenda, working in connection with the United States, then there will be no international space.
In 2022, Beijing's strong response to Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan came quickly after her departure, with large-scale military exercises and intensified talks of an eventual reunification. Back then, over 160 countries condemned Pelosi's trip and reiterated their commitment to the One China principle. It remains to be seen the fallout from Tsai Ing-wen's controversial trip to the United States this time, but one thing is almost certain. Taiwan's secessionist-minded politicians won't be allowed by Beijing to go on making a scene like this, nor will they be allowed to collude with their patrons in Washington indefinitely. In the mind of many Chinese, enough is enough.